Elvis Presley was the first global pop phenomenon modern entertainment had ever witnessed. Before social media, before non-stop television, before viral culture, Elvis Presley reached a level of fame that no artist before him had survived intact. His records sold by the millions, his films dominated box offices, his television appearances were watched by entire nations at the same moment. When Elvis moved, culture moved with him. At the height of his success, he was untouchable. A chart-breaking musician, a Hollywood movie star, a symbol of rebellion, sexuality, and youth that terrified conservative America while electrifying a generation. Yet even at the peak, cracks were visible beneath the crown. Elvis did not control his career the way the world believed he did. Powerful figures managed his image, his schedule, and his finances. Hollywood turned him into a reliable box office product, but the films that made money slowly drained his artistic credibility. The more successful he became, the less freedom he appeared to have. Fame brought him everything except ownership of his own life. Away from the stage, his private world grew increasingly fragile. Long hours, relentless expectations, a dependence on medication to maintain performance, sleep, and control. Isolation inside Graceland replaced the intimacy of normal life. Relationships suffered, trust narrowed. The man adored by millions lived surrounded, yet alone. There were moments that shocked the public, years without live performances, a dramatic televised comeback that reminded the world of his raw power. A body visibly changed by exhaustion in excess, a voice still commanding but carrying strain beneath its strength. And then came the final moment no one expected, yet many feared. Elvis Presley's death did not simply end a career, it froze a myth in time and ignited decades of unanswered questions. How did the most profitable entertainer in the world lose control so completely? Why did the system that benefited from him never intervene? And who, if anyone, was protecting the man behind the legend? Tonight, Hollywood Darkside TV invites you to revisit Elvis Presley not as an icon, but as a case study of absolute fame. We explore the rise that changed popular culture forever, the hidden pressures that shaped his choices, and the silence that followed the loudest applause in history. He once stood on the highest throne music and cinema had ever built. But after the crown, the contracts, and the cheers, where did Elvis Presley truly end up?
Elvis Presley was born into limitation. Not metaphorical limitation, but physical, economic, and social constraint. He arrived in Tupelo, Mississippi during a period when opportunity was unevenly distributed and ambition rarely escaped geography. His family lived on the edge of instability. Money was scarce, security was uncertain. What they possessed instead was closeness and a quiet determination to endure. Elvis grew up surrounded by contradictions. On one side was poverty, discipline, and religious structure. On the other was sound, church music, gospel harmonies, and the emotional release they offered became his earliest education. Music was not entertainment first, it was expression. It gave form to feelings that daily life did not allow space for. His relationship with his parents shaped him deeply. His mother, Gladys, provided emotional grounding and protection, creating a bond that would later become both refuge and vulnerability. His father, Vernon, represented responsibility without authority, presence without power. Between them, Elvis learned dependency and loyalty long before he learned independence. This emotional architecture would follow him into fame. As a child, Elvis was not exceptional in appearance or confidence. He was reserved, sensitive, often observing rather than participating. Music became his method of presence. He absorbed styles indiscriminately, listening across boundaries others maintained. Blues, gospel, country, rhythm and blues. He did not categorize, he internalized. This openness would later define both his originality and the controversy surrounding it. Adolescence brought displacement.
The family moved to Memphis, a city charged with cultural tension and musical possibility. Memphis exposed Elvis to a broader spectrum of sound and identity. It also placed him at the intersection of traditions that rarely met openly. He did not approach this environment with intention. He moved through it instinctively, absorbing influences without strategy. His early ambitions were modest. He did not set out to revolutionize culture. He wanted to record a song, to be heard. His first recordings were personal gestures, not career moves. Yet something in his voice unsettled expectations. It carried vulnerability without fragility, control without rigidity. When he sang, he did not perform distance, he performed closeness. The turning point came not through calculated planning, but through recognition. Producers heard in Elvis something difficult to define, but impossible to ignore. His sound resisted categorization. His presence disrupted norms. When he performed publicly, reactions were immediate and intense. Audiences responded physically, emotionally, instinctively. This response frightened some and energized others. It could not be neutralized. Success followed rapidly, too rapidly for preparation. Records gained attention beyond regional boundaries. Performances escalated in scale and consequence. Elvis became a figure onto which cultural anxieties were projected. Youth saw liberation. Authority saw threat. He did not control these interpretations. He embodied them. As fame accelerated, control shifted away from the individual. Decisions were made to protect profitability, manage risk, and maximize exposure. Elvis, still emotionally anchored to family and familiar structures, deferred rather than resisted. Management provided order, contracts provided direction. What was framed as guidance gradually became governance. This stage of his life established a pattern that would persist. Elvis entered fame without a developed sense of authorship. His trust in authority figures replaced autonomy. The rapid ascent left no space for recalibration. The machine moved forward, and he moved with it. By the time he became a national phenomenon, the foundation was already set. A sensitive individual shaped by loyalty, dependency, and instinct was placed at the center of an industry optimized for output, not preservation. His rise was extraordinary, but it was not reinforced by independence. It was reinforced by structure imposed from outside. The road to fame did not teach Elvis how to protect himself. It taught him how to perform. And that distinction would matter far more than anyone realized at the time.
At the height of his ascent, Elvis Presley became more than a successful entertainer. He became a force that reorganized attention itself. His recordings no longer competed within categories, they dominated space. Charts bent around his presence, radio schedules adjusted, television events turned into national rituals. Elvis was not simply popular, he was unavoidable. What distinguished this period was speed. Success arrived faster than systems could adapt. Songs reached audiences before explanations followed. Reactions preceded understanding. His voice carried emotional urgency, but it was his physicality that unsettled established norms. Movement, once incidental to performance, became central. The body itself was read as message. Admiration and outrage emerged simultaneously, feeding the same momentum. Hollywood responded with opportunity and containment. Films offered scale and security, transforming Elvis into a reliable box office presence. His image was refined for mass appeal, softened at the edges, controlled in presentation. The movies were profitable and frequent, reinforcing his visibility while narrowing his creative range. Each release extended his dominance while quietly redirecting his identity from musician to product. This period created a paradox. Elvis reached unprecedented exposure while losing authorship over his work. Decisions were optimized for output, schedules intensified, repetition replaced exploration. The industry valued consistency over evolution. For a figure built on disruption,
This transition dulled the original spark without extinguishing popularity. On stage, however, the connection remained raw. Live performances revealed an energy that recordings and films could not fully capture. Audiences responded viscerally, not intellectually. The exchange was immediate and physical. Elvis appeared to draw strength from these moments, even as the scale made intimacy impossible. The crowd became both affirmation and barrier. With fame came institutional validation. Awards, headlines, and financial success confirmed his status. Yet validation did not translate into autonomy. The mechanisms that sustained his peak also restricted his movement. Contracts extended obligations. Expectations hardened into routines. The more successful he became, the less flexibility he possessed. Culturally, Elvis symbolized transformation. He represented youth asserting presence against inherited order. This symbolism magnified scrutiny. Every choice became representative. Every appearance was interpreted. Elvis did not seek this role. He inherited it. The weight of expectation pressed inward, reshaping how he navigated public space. As the peak extended, fatigue appeared beneath performance. Touring intensified, filming schedules compressed, recovery time shortened. The body became an instrument pushed beyond natural limits. To maintain pace, systems intervened. Solutions prioritized continuity over sustainability. Short-term stability replaced long-term care. Despite these pressures, Elvis remained productive. Albums sold, films succeeded, appearances drew record audiences. From the outside, the peak seemed endless. From within, it required constant reinforcement. Momentum became obligation. Obligation became identity. This era solidified his global stature. Elvis was no longer a performer responding to culture. He was culture, projected and preserved through repetition. The industry treated this condition as permanence. Few asked how long it could last. At the peak, the question shifted from achievement to maintenance. How does a phenomenon continue without transformation? How does a person remain present when the structure around them resists change? Elvis navigated these tensions without publicly confronting them, trusting systems that promised stability. The cost of that trust would not be immediate. Peaks rarely collapse suddenly. They erode. Subtle compromises accumulate. Control consolidates. The distance between the man and the machine widens. Elvis Presley reached a height unmatched by his contemporaries, but the higher he stood, the more difficult movement became. In the peak, once secured, began quietly shaping the descent that followed.
As his dominance stabilized, Elvis Presley entered a phase where pressure replaced momentum. Fame no longer arrived as discovery, it arrived as expectation. Every appearance was evaluated against a past peak, every decision measured against a myth that had grown larger than the man sustaining it. In this environment, tension did not announce itself loudly, it accumulated quietly. Public controversy followed patterns rather than explosions. Elvis was rarely involved in overt scandal by modern standards, yet unease surrounded him consistently. His movements were monitored, his image was negotiated. The freedom that had once defined his appeal became increasingly curated. What the public interpreted as discipline was often containment. One of the most visible disruptions came with prolonged absence from live performance. Years passed without touring, creating speculation about decline, fear, and control. Some interpreted the absence as strategic, others sensed avoidance. The truth was never clarified, and ambiguity became part of the narrative. Elvis did not address the questions directly. Silence functioned as protection. Behind closed doors, exhaustion intensified. The pace established during his peak proved unsustainable. Performance required repetition. Repetition demanded endurance. Endurance invited intervention. Medical assistance, initially practical, expanded into dependency.
The goal was not indulgence, but continuity. The system prioritized reliability over recovery, mistaking functionality for health. Private life offered little relief. Relationships strained under imbalance. Trust narrowed as decision-making centralized around management structures. Elvis, conditioned by loyalty and habit, deferred rather than resisted. This deference was not weakness, it was adaptation learned early and reinforced by success. Yet adaptation carried consequences. Public perception shifted gradually. The rebellious figure once feared by authority became a controlled institution. Critics questioned artistic stagnation, admirers defended consistency. Both perspectives overlooked the underlying condition. Elvis was functioning inside a framework designed to extract value rather than foster longevity. Media attention intensified around physical change. Appearance became commentary. Weight fluctuations, fatigue, and altered presence were interpreted without context. Elvis did not correct narratives. He performed when required and withdrew when possible. The gap between public image and private reality widened. The return to live performance marked a turning point. It was framed as resurgence, and audiences responded with enthusiasm. The voice retained power, the presence commanded attention. Yet beneath the spectacle, the cost of return was evident. The body carried strain, recovery shortened, momentum resumed without addressing underlying erosion. Public controversies during this phase were rarely singular events. They were cumulative impressions. Concerns layered upon rumors. Patterns replaced incidents. The absence of transparency allowed speculation to fill gaps. Elvis remained visible enough to sustain myth, but distant enough to prevent understanding. Institutional loyalty remained strong. Financial success continued. Appearances sold out. The system interpreted this as validation, yet validation masked vulnerability. Success delayed intervention. Applause postponed accountability. As years progressed, control tightened further. Schedules intensified, circles narrowed. The environment became insulated, resistant to external correction. Elvis existed at the center of a structure optimized for output, not interruption. Questioning the system risked destabilizing it, and destabilization threatened everyone involved. The most profound controversy of this period was not scandal, but neglect. The failure to pause, the reluctance to reassess, the assumption that endurance equaled strength. Elvis did not collapse publicly. He continued, and in continuing, the warning signs became normalized. Public reaction remained divided. Some saw decline, others saw perseverance. Both views existed simultaneously, reinforcing the myth while obscuring the man. Elvis became an image sustained by repetition, his humanity increasingly inaccessible. This phase did not end in dramatic rupture. It narrowed gradually. Options reduced, flexibility disappeared. The system that had elevated him now required maintenance beyond human capacity. Elvis adapted by relying on structures that promised stability while eroding autonomy. The turmoil of this era was not chaotic, it was orderly, efficient, quietly destructive. Elvis remained present, productive, and revered, but the distance between appearance and reality reached its widest point. The controversy was not what happened, it was what did not stop. And that unresolved tension would shape everything that followed.
As the years moved forward, the spotlight surrounding Elvis Presley did not vanish, it softened. The intensity that once defined every appearance gave way to familiarity, and familiarity altered the meaning of attention. Elvis was still visible, still celebrated, but no longer disruptive. The world had adjusted to his presence, and adjustment changed the rules. Life after the height of fame is not absence, it is repetition without surprise. For Elvis, performances continued, schedules remained full, and audiences still responded. Yet the emotional exchange shifted. Applause confirmed recognition rather than discovery.
The thrill of unpredictability faded, replaced by obligation. Each show reaffirmed status while quietly reinforcing limits. The environment around him became increasingly controlled. Movement was planned, interactions were filtered. Spontaneity disappeared under the weight of routine. What once felt like protection gradually became confinement. Elvis did not rebel against this structure, he relied on it. Familiarity offered stability in a life where autonomy had long been compromised. Physically, the cost of endurance became unavoidable. The body, long treated as a vessel for performance, demanded attention. Energy fluctuated, recovery slowed. Medical intervention shifted from support to necessity. These changes were not publicly framed as decline. They were managed, contained, and normalized within his circle. Continuity remained the priority. Creatively, the later period reflected restraint rather than exploration. Risk diminished, experimentation narrowed. The system favored predictability. Elvis fulfilled expectations rather than redefining them. This approach preserved legacy but limited renewal. The artist remained present, but the urgency that once drove innovation had softened. Private life offered limited refuge. The scale of fame made ordinary existence difficult. Public curiosity persisted, even as intimacy receded. Graceland became both sanctuary and enclosure, a space that symbolized control over environment while reinforcing separation from the outside world. Visitors came, schedules resumed, and isolation deepened beneath activity. Emotionally, reflection increased. Elvis carried awareness of time in a way that youth had never required. The future no longer stretched indefinitely. Choices felt irreversible. Paths once available had narrowed, yet he did not publicly articulate regret. He maintained composure, adhering to an image of steadiness that had long defined him. Life after the height of fame also meant living with memory. Past performances followed him, setting standards that current moments could not escape. Comparisons were unavoidable. Each appearance was measured against an earlier version of himself. Elvis did not attempt to outrun these comparisons, he existed alongside them. Despite limitations, he remained committed to performance. The act of appearing, singing, and engaging sustained identity. Stopping entirely would have required confronting silence directly. Continuation offered purpose, even when it demanded sacrifice. The system rewarded persistence. Applause reinforced effort. The cycle repeated. This period was not marked by disappearance, it was defined by endurance. Elvis did not retreat from public life. He remained accessible, visible, and productive, yet the quality of that visibility shifted. Fame no longer expanded, it enclosed. Observers interpreted this stage differently. Some saw dignity and perseverance, others saw warning signs ignored too long. Elvis did not clarify which interpretation he accepted. He continued within the structure that had shaped his life, trusting familiarity over uncertainty. Life after the spotlight rarely delivers resolution. It offers accumulation. The sum of choices, habits, and compromises becomes increasingly visible. For Elvis, this accumulation carried weight. The machine that had elevated him still functioned, but it required more from him than it once had. He existed in a space between relevance and rest, unable to fully embrace either. The world still wanted Elvis Presley. The man himself carried fatigue beneath compliance, yet stopping would have meant confronting a void he had never been prepared to face. The height of fame had passed, but its influence remained constant. Elvis lived inside the structure it created, sustained by routine, protected by insulation, and constrained by continuity. This was not downfall, it was persistence without renewal. And persistence, when prolonged, carries consequences that only time can reveal.
For Elvis Presley, family was never separate from fame. It existed within it, shaped by it, and often overshadowed by it. The private world he longed for was constantly exposed to public expectation, turning intimacy into another space that required management and restraint. His bond with his mother had defined his emotional foundation long before success arrived.
Gladys Presley represented safety, loyalty, and unconditional support. When fame accelerated, that bond intensified rather than softened. She became an anchor in a life increasingly defined by movement and demand. Her death marked a rupture that Elvis never fully repaired. Loss introduced a vulnerability that success could not compensate for, and its absence reshaped his emotional landscape permanently. Romantic relationships followed a similar pattern. They began with closeness and admiration, but struggled under imbalance. Elvis's schedule, visibility, and dependency on routine limited the possibility of equality. Partners entered a world already occupied by expectation, control, and absence. Love existed, but it was rarely uncomplicated. The demands of his public role intruded on private connection, narrowing space for spontaneity and mutual growth. Marriage offered structure, but not resolution. Domestic life required consistency, while Elvis's identity thrived on performance. The tension between these needs remained unresolved. Responsibility coexisted with distance. Presence alternated with absence. Family life unfolded within a framework designed for continuity rather than adaptation. Fatherhood introduced a different dimension of responsibility. He cared deeply, yet his involvement was shaped by circumstance rather than intention. Protection, provision, and recognition were available. Time and emotional availability were limited. The legacy of his name carried opportunity and burden in equal measure. Being connected to Elvis Presley meant access, but it also meant living under comparison. Life beyond fame did not arrive suddenly. It emerged gradually, as repetition replaced novelty and obligation replaced ambition. Elvis's world narrowed into familiar spaces. Routines stabilized daily life while reducing exposure to unpredictability. This structure offered comfort but reinforced isolation. The outside world remained present, but at a controlled distance. In this phase, relationships required adaptation. Some endured, strengthened by shared history and loyalty. Others faded quietly, unable to survive without the energy that fame once supplied. Elvis did not publicly address these changes. He accepted them as consequence rather than failure. His social circle became increasingly insulated. Familiar faces provided continuity. New connections were rare. Trust favored longevity over possibility. This environment minimized disruption but limited renewal. Emotional safety was achieved at the cost of expansion. Life beyond fame also meant living alongside memory. Past achievements shaped expectations for present interaction. Elvis existed as both individual and symbol, often simultaneously. Ordinary experiences were filtered through recognition. Privacy remained partial. Even in quiet moments, presence carried weight. Despite limitations, Elvis did not withdraw completely. Engagement continued through performances, appearances, and controlled interaction. The act of remaining visible preserved identity, even as it demanded sacrifice. Stopping entirely would have required confronting a version of life he had never been trained to inhabit. Family relationships reflected this tension. Love persisted, but simplicity remained elusive. The systems that had elevated him were never dismantled. They continued to influence how connection functioned, how decisions were made, and how distance was managed. Life beyond fame was not a retreat into obscurity. It was a prolonged negotiation between obligation and fatigue, loyalty and isolation. Elvis carried these contradictions quietly, rarely articulating them publicly. He maintained composure, even as the cost accumulated. This phase of his life did not resolve earlier conflicts, it extended them. Fame had shaped identity so completely that separation felt impossible. Family existed within this reality, adapting rather than escaping. Elvis Presley lived beyond his peak, surrounded by familiarity, responsibility, and memory. The world still recognized him. The man himself navigated the consequences of having been recognized too completely.
The question left lingering was not whether fame had given him everything, it was whether it had left room for anything else.
Long after the noise of his era softened into memory, Elvis Presley remained present in ways that did not depend on appearance or performance. His legacy did not require revival. It persisted structurally, embedded in how popular music, celebrity, and mass culture learned to function. Elvis was no longer an active participant in history. He became one of its reference points. In music, his impact was immediate and irreversible. Elvis did not invent the sounds he carried, but he altered their trajectory. By bringing blues, gospel, and rhythm-driven expression into mainstream visibility, he forced cultural boundaries to shift. What had once been segregated by audience and geography entered shared space. This movement redefined what popular music could be and who it could belong to. Future performers absorbed this lesson instinctively. They learned that voice was not merely technical skill, but identity. That performance could be physical, emotional, and confrontational without explanation. Elvis showed that presence itself could become language. Generations that followed did not replicate his style, but they inherited the permission he created. His influence extended beyond sound into the mechanics of fame. Elvis was among the first entertainers to experience total visibility. His image circulated faster than interpretation could keep pace. This condition became the blueprint for modern celebrity. Artists who followed navigated systems refined by his experience, systems that balanced exposure, control, and profit. In this sense, Elvis was not only a performer, but a prototype. Cinema absorbed his legacy differently. His films demonstrated how popularity could sustain production regardless of artistic risk. This model influenced casting decisions and studio strategies for decades. The notion that a name alone could guarantee audience engagement reshaped Hollywood economics. Even as critics questioned artistic depth, the structure endured. Culturally, Elvis became a symbol subject to reinterpretation. To some, he represented liberation and transformation. To others, appropriation and imbalance. These debates did not diminish his presence, they sustained it. His image became a site of discussion rather than resolution. Each generation projected its concerns onto him, ensuring continued relevance. The endurance of his legacy is evident in absence as much as presence. Elvis is referenced without explanation. His name functions as shorthand for a moment when culture changed direction. This shorthand persists because it remains useful. It provides context for conversations about originality, influence, and consequence. Yet legacy also carries silence. Certain aspects of his life remain unexamined or deliberately simplified. Complexity is often reduced for consumption. The contradictions that defined his experience are smoothed into symbols. This process preserves myth while obscuring cost. Elvis's legacy benefits from this simplification, but it is also limited by it. For future generations, Elvis represents both possibility and warning. He demonstrated how rapidly success can arrive and how difficult it is to control once it does. His life illustrates the imbalance between cultural impact and personal agency. Influence expanded even as autonomy narrowed. This paradox remains relevant in every era of mass visibility. Artists who study his trajectory often focus on endurance. Elvis did not disappear when trends shifted. He persisted through reinvention, repetition, and reliance on structure. This persistence is admired, yet it invites reflection. Longevity achieved without renewal carries its own consequences. Public memory often elevates his image above his experience. The white suits, the stage presence, the mythology dominate representation. Yet beneath these symbols lies a human narrative shaped by pressure, loyalty, and adaptation. Legacy preserves the surface. History questions what lies beneath. Elvis Presley's influence cannot be measured solely by imitation or tribute. It exists in expectation, in how audiences respond to performance, in how industries manage exposure, in how fame is understood as both opportunity and risk. These structures continue to operate long after individual memory fades.
In this way, Elvis does not belong entirely to the past. He remains embedded in the present, shaping assumptions without requiring acknowledgement. His legacy functions less as celebration and more as foundation. As future generations encounter his work, they do not simply hear songs or see images. They encounter the origin of a system they already inhabit. Elvis becomes context rather than content, a figure whose importance lies in what followed as much as what he achieved. The question his legacy leaves behind is not whether he changed culture. That is already decided. The question is how much culture changed him in return.
Looking back at the life of Elvis Presley, it becomes clear that his story is not simply about music, fame, or loss. It is a study of scale. How quickly influence can expand beyond human limits, and how difficult it becomes to remain intact once that expansion begins. Elvis did not just succeed, he entered a dimension of visibility that few before him had experienced, and none had been prepared to survive. He transformed popular culture permanently. He reshaped sound, performance, and identity. He became a global symbol before the world understood what global symbols cost. From the outside, his life appeared extraordinary. Wealth, recognition, devotion, and power followed him relentlessly. Yet beneath the achievements existed a quieter reality, a man shaped by loyalty, dependency, and adaptation, moving through systems that rewarded output over preservation. Fame gave him a throne, but it also removed the possibility of stepping away from it. Elvis's story reveals the imbalance between cultural impact and personal agency. The more influential he became, the less control he retained. Decisions were made to sustain momentum, structures formed to prevent disruption. Over time, continuation replaced choice. The person at the center of the phenomenon became secondary to the phenomenon itself. This is not a story of collapse alone. It is a story of endurance without relief. Elvis continued when stopping felt impossible. He performed when rest was needed. He adapted when resistance might have changed outcomes. His life illustrates how loyalty can become limitation and how protection can quietly transform into confinement. These shifts did not occur suddenly. They accumulated, disguised as necessity. His death froze a moment in time, preserving an image that continues to dominate memory. The myth remains powerful because it simplifies what reality could not. But behind the myth exists a human narrative defined by pressure rather than freedom. Elvis became immortal in culture, yet his life reminds us that immortality rarely arrives without sacrifice. Today, his influence remains undeniable. His voice still circulates, his image still commands attention, his name still defines an era. But influence alone does not explain his significance. What endures is the question his life leaves behind. What happens when success arrives faster than understanding? When systems grow stronger than the individuals they serve? When fame expands beyond the capacity of the person carrying it? At Hollywood Darkside TV, we do not revisit legends to dismantle them. We revisit them to understand what their journeys reveal about power, visibility, and cost. Elvis Presley's life offers no simple lesson, it offers perspective. He stood at the highest point popular culture had ever constructed. The world watched him rise. The world benefited from his presence. But when the music faded and the structure remained, was Elvis Presley remembered as a man who lived his fame or as a man who was lived by it?